Welcome everyone to It Tastes Different Gaming Appetizers, and tonight we're going to talk about that flaming rig you built with that new NVIDIA 40 series GPU that's going to catch your rig on fire. So, CableMod has basically done a voluntary recall on their angled 12-volt high-power connector. It's causing fire damage. $74,000 worth of damage to cards claimed by a couple of retailers that repair the actual GPUs. So CableMod has basically did a voluntary recall on their angled power adapter. According to the recall notice, it's because the adapters present fire and burn hazards. The propensity for the 16-pin 12-volt high-power connector to overheat and melt has been a thorn in the side of the latest NVIDIA GPU since its launch. But like I said, it's CableMod is doing the right thing by giving you a credit. I guess from what I understand, all you got to do is take a picture of the destroyed connector and submit it, and they will give you a refund. They don't want it back. You know, it costs them too much to ship all that stuff back. So the recall covers the 90-degree adapters as well as the straight units. So the straight units are also covered. It says that it's angled 12-volt cables as opposed to adapters aren't really affected. So I don't know. It's kind of a very confusing recall because it says in one sentence that it covers the recall also covers the straight units, but then CableMod says that its angled cables aren't affected. So basically the straight through cables and the 90 adapter, the L adapter, is what's causing the problem. So, and this is a report from the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission, the CPSC. So they're basically saying that this is a problem, which, a lot of this has been happening since the 40 series came out, and they were doing the whole, 2 pins or even in some cases where I saw they were doing the 4-pin to 1-pin. A lot of heat is being transferred to that. 600 volts worth of power has to go to this cable or this GPU. And so there's been people blaming end user related. They're saying that you're not seating it properly, but eventually what this kind of comes down to in states that I've seen is that the male pin in the connector and the Moldex can become loose and wiggle. And so it doesn't create a tight fit. And so it's just arcing in there on that thing and just generating heat and melting the adapters and damaging the GPU. So that's pretty rough, especially for those 40 series cards, because those are pricey cards. They're nice cards, but they are pricey. So the notice states that there are around 25,300 units in the U.S. that are part of the recall. And I guess there's 272 incidences out of that number of failed units, which is just a little over 1%, which is a pretty good failure rate. But because of this has a potential for burning your house down and, burning you and damaging life and property, they're going to recall it. This is a weird thing, right? Because their adapters just seem to be like, they remind me of like just a little angled adapter that you just hang cords on and plug into there, right? So what have they done inside of this thing? They've used cheaper components or thinner cables, and then they use like some bad moldex, that the male pins don't quite fit in right. What are they doing? But I've even read that some of the NVIDIA ones that were coming out were pretty much garbage too, causing melted endpoints and stuff like that. Like I said, I've seen multiple ways because they do the single 12-volt rail or 12-pin rail that's 600 volts. So it's 6 pins on top, 6 pins on bottom. But I've seen adapters that take anywhere from 2 separate connectors, so 2 6-pin connectors, and they make a 1-pin. And I've also seen a 4-pin connector where they take, each individual some 4 pins and such to make a whole 12-pin. And I'm like, that's a lot of voltage being channeled into one Moldex that plugs in, and that's a lot of heat. So you're going to have problems there. I did hear that back in September or whatever, there's already a new replacement technology and that's coming out for this. It's basically going to, instead of being a 12-volt rail, it's going to be a single 12-pin rail. It's going to be 2 6-pin rails. So that'll help a little bit, right? Get some of that heat away from that. And it just depends on how they do it, right? Obviously, the GPUs aren't going to change, so the pins are going to still be close together. I really hate those overlapping pins that you got to like line up and get them just right, because if you get one, if it slips behind there, it's not going to seat properly, so you're probably just causing you more problems. But they've been doing that for years, right? I remember when they had the 24 pin motherboard, they would do like a 16 8-pin or a 24, a 20 pin rail and a 4-pin rail that just kind of like had little arms that push it. To me, I always hated that because I feel like it's not seating properly, and that if I get one of those little helper arms off the larger pin set just cockeyed wrong, it's going to melt my motherboard rail. So it's a lot of power. I mean, if you need 600 volts for your GPU alone, that's a massive power supply. I mean, I think I don't have a 40 series in mine. I'm still in the 30 series on mine, but I don't have anywhere. I think I have a 800 watt, power supply, and having to dedicate 600 volts of that 800 watts over to my GPU would be insane. So PCs are just getting more power hungry. But it sounds like, CableMod's doing the right thing here, but that's insane. What do you think, Nick? Are you worried about your PC catching on fire and, and burning your house down?
Well, I don't have a CableMod on mine. I do have a 40 series card. And normally, most of these burn-ins have happened with 4090s. Not all of them, but most of them. Most of the reports I've seen, and even before when these cards came out, the 4090 series seemed to be having the biggest issue, even with not using CableMods, but just the adapter that came in the box, because your 40 series will come with adapter if you have an older power supply that doesn't handle the 12-pin connector. Mine does. My power supply does, so I can just connect it straight into the graphics card. But yeah, it is. I can, and a lot of it initially came, like you said, from people saying, "Oh, it's user error." But those pins are difficult to get into that power supply, and you don't quite know if they're in all the way. Yes, it does have the snap where the little thing snaps at the top, but it's really hard to tell sometimes when you're trying to put it in there. The way I found when I put mine in is like I just jammed that thing in there as hard as I could until I figured it was in, right? And it looked like it had a flashlight and was looking to see if the seams were connected all the way, because I was reading a lot of these catching fire or melting the pins, and I didn't want to brick my new 40 series card, which I have a 4080. So it was like, I mean, mine's been fine so far, right? It hasn't caught on fire, doesn't get hot or anything like, I mean, sure, it gets hot, but I mean, it's not like overheating or anything like that. So I think I got it in there good, but I mean, like, yeah, this is a big problem, right? And this has been a big problem, not just for CableMod in this sense with their angled adapters and stuff, but with NVIDIA in general, with these 12-pin connectors, right? Like you said, with all that, or are they 16-pin connectors?
Yeah, that was my bad. They're a 16-pin.
Oh, 16-pin connector.
Yeah, the next technology is going to be 12-pin, a 2x6 rail. So yeah, it's 16-pin. So
yeah. So yeah, but it's been a problem for NVIDIA for a while, even with the release, especially of the 4090s. I don't know what the difference between the 4090s. I mean, it is a more powerful card, but than the 4080s. But for some reason, the 4090s seem to have a lot of problems, and NVIDIA, at first was really just kind of ignoring the problem, like you said, saying it's user error and stuff like that. But it doesn't seem to be that way. I mean, still NVIDIA hasn't said they're going to do anything about it, but clearly it's still an issue, even with using a CableMod adapter in this case. So yeah, and they said so the recall also covers the straight unit. So yeah, it's an L shape and the 90-degree adapters and the straight units. So all the adapters basically that go in from besides the angled 12 pin or 12 volt adapter cables. So I don't know what the difference is. I don't know why those are a difference between the other ones. Maybe it's the way, like you said, the way it was designed, or maybe it's just the shape. I'm not sure. I mean, that was also one thing they talked about too, was even putting in the cable, was when the cable would flex, and that would cause a gap to happen, like you said, and then cause it to arc and melt, right? Because the cable would flex because it's being bent, right? And that was kind of the way to, that CableMod was kind of trying to fix that issue with the angled, or with the 90-degree curved or L-shaped adapters. So, because that cable does stick out, so maybe your door, your side door or side of the chassis of your PC may not close because that's sticking out too far or whatever, and so that kind of, plus the angle of the dangle may angle wrong, causing a split between the cable connected into the graphics card, causing an issue, right? And so I don't know. It's good. I'm glad that they're thinking about doing something different with the next iteration of cards. But I mean, they really do need to come up with some sort of other solution, because that's a lot of power going into one device. And that can definitely cause things to heat up, especially if, I think it would be even more apt if you have an older power supply, or maybe a cheaper power supply or something like that has, or even in these case with CableMod, I don't know what the insides of them look like, but if they're thin wires on the inside, or even your power supply has a thin, not thick enough wiring for all that electricity to go, all that voltage to go through, then you're going to have melting cables and all sorts of a messy thing, right? And it's good on CableMod to go ahead and recall this. It's not, it's about 1%, like you said. So it's not everybody has this problem. A majority don't, but it's better I think for CableMod to be like, what, it's a voluntary recall. You get a full refund via PayPal, or you can get credit through their online store along with free shipping. So if you want to buy some other CableMod product, you can put that credit back on there, or just get your money back altogether. So I think it's good for CableMod to do that and say, what, screw it. Like, you can return your CableMod if you want, and we'll give you a full refund for it. Right. We know this is an issue. Even before this became an issue, like I said, I've seen a lot of, it's kind of funny because me and Pat were talking about computer repair videos. And sometimes we get catch ourselves watching those, people just like soldering HDMIs, or working on. I remember watching one where guys were working on the 4090s, and it was the same problem every time, where the connector was melting right there at the 12 pin. So, or the 16 pin. So it's like, and for them, it was like basically trying to tell NVIDIA, like, hey, you have a problem here, right? But NVIDIA was not, especially with their 4090s. It seemed like most of the time, when they would get one of these that were melted, it was the 4090 cards. Not all the time, but I'd say majority of the time it was that. So NVIDIA's got a big problem here. I don't think it's just a problem with CableMod in particular. It is for this recall, but I don't think it's just them. I think NVIDIA's got a big problem with their 4090s, with these, the way that they're, I don't know. Again, I don't know what the difference between the 4090 and 4080 are. I mean, besides the 4090 being more powerful, but is it just drawing way more power than a 4080, to where it has a higher failure rate? I'm not sure what the biggest difference is between the two that would cause the 4090s to more likely have this issue than the 4080s. But, good on NVIDIA for at least trying to fix it in the next iteration. Bad on them for not acknowledging that it is a problem, right? Because I don't think I've seen any acknowledgement of them being like, yep, that sucks. That's our bad. Like, we'll replace them or do something different. They're just kind of like, sweep it under the rug. Don't worry about it, type of thing. But it's, It's a big issue, especially if you go out and buy a 4090s. Those 4090s are not cheap, right? They are not cheap. 40 series cards are not cheap. I mean, they have the supers out now, which are about $1,000, right? So if you want to get a cheaper version of the 40 card, you can get the supers. But still, though, that's $1,000 is $1,000, and to be able to go out buy $1,000 card or more, right, depending on the card you get with the 40 series cards, and then have it burn up a week later, not due to your own negligence, right? Sure, you may have not gotten the cable in all the way. There is times when that happens, but if you've done it properly and it still gets damaged, hopefully, luckily you have a warranty with those, so you can probably get it replaced from the manufacturer. But still, though, it shouldn't be a problem in the first place. But like I said, good on CableMod to at least voluntarily recall this, right? And say, yeah, let's just go ahead and take care of it. Let's handle the problem. The problem is, as far as what we can handle, right, which is replacing our CableMod products. But like I said, it's not just them. Even the splitters that come with the cards in the box have had issues, right? And that could be due again to users plugging them in, or it could be a bigger issue, which I don't know. I'm leaning towards more it's a bigger issue with those cards, but I don't think we'll ever hear NVIDIA admit something to that, if it is, right? So.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, the pin always throws me off because it's like a 12x4, right? And it's like 12. It's a 6-pin. It's a rail that has 12 pins. 6 on top, 6 on bottom, and it has that weird little 4-pin at the very top. Where I always see the clip. We always see the clip in the power supply. There's actually 4 pins there.
Those 4 little pins,
and that always throws me off. I'm like, there's 12 pins here. There's actually 4 more that you're not looking at. So it's a single connector. But from what I understand is the new one's going to go into splitting it into like the 12 volt 2x6 is supposedly the next. And I don't know how that's going to help it. I don't know.
Maybe they just figure it's too much going through one
rail. Through one rail,
yeah.
Yeah, one cable and splitting it out into 2. Because you're going to feed in 2 what 2 8-pin connectors into the whole the GPU connector is not changing. It's the power supply side. It's splitting the cable from 2 8-pin 300 watt each rails, so 600 watts of power. I think I said 600 volts earlier. I meant 600 watts of power earlier. 600 watts, so 2 300 delivering 600 watts of total power. So that's 600 watts. I couldn't run that on my GPU, on my power supply, obviously, because I have a 750 in mine. So I believe they even require like a minimum of an 850 watt power supply for that 4090 card. So I'm not running anything. I can't afford that anyway. But yeah, I'd like to, technology's moving pretty quick always. Moore's law is dead, they always say. But GPUs are getting more powerful, and sucking up more and more power to where a 750 watt power supply is not enough if you want a 4090. You need 850. I don't know. It's just insane to think about how much watts is flowing through this 16-pin connector. When you look at the new RTX series NVIDIA cards, the fan on those things is like massive too, but they've always been kind of massive, but it always looks like the card's like this big, and then you have like this much fan everywhere to cool that sucker down. Would I love to have one? Yes. I don't know, man. That just, because we were talking about the recall from CableMod, but they're not the only ones to get complaints, right? I mean, NVIDIA's gotten complaints on the connector that comes with the card by default, which was like a 4-into-1 splitter, and things like that. So, and they were blaming, that's what we're talking about. They're blaming on user error and things like that. But if you have I've had power supplies that have really crappy Molodex connectors in there, and you're just like, those pins are wiggling like nobody's business in there. Is this really going to seat? Am I really going to carry 600 watts, from this? If I'm doing 4 into 1, that's 150 watts on each of those connectors. But yeah, it sounds like for the future, when Corsair and all these other power supply companies come out, instead of being a single rail delivering 600 watts, they're going to split that into 2 rails, delivering it to one endpoint for the GPU. So, because so because all the pictures that I saw and images from things that were going around on this do appear to be the melting is happening not at the GPU connector end, but at the power supply connector or the dongle end, which then I guess just, basically shorts into the GPU and burns up the GPU. So I don't know. We'll have to see. I know that, like I said,
I mean, that's where NVIDIA can get away with saying it's user error and stuff like that, right? Because it is, even like some of the repair shows and stuff, when they show like where the burn-in was happening, yes, it's always at where the cable is, not necessarily the plug-in at the GPU or in the graphics card itself, but where the cable that plugs in. So sometimes it could be user error, but I mean, I assume that's just the way it's arcing. It's just it's starting there, right? But it's actually because of that so many watts going through there, I would imagine, or something like
too much heat. Too much heat and plastic just doesn't mix, right? We're going to start seeing solid metal connectors or brass connectors or non-conductive metal connectors. We're going to start seeing that instead of plastic connectors in the future, or everything's metal reinforced plastic. It's got little plastic metal rebar running through that plastic connector to try to reinforce it so it doesn't warp and bend. I don't know, man. That's insane to me to think about this, that you could be, we're pumping 600 watts into a single GPU these days. That's insane. I try to stay up on new technology, but I'll be honest, if I'm not building a new rig, I don't really pay attention to what's pumping into, like, I wasn't really paying attention that we're pumping 600 watts into a GPU. Right. I'm like, wow, that's insane. Cause I don't own a 40 series card. So I have no clue they've changed the power rail into this, this 12 plus 4 pin connector rail. For the PCIe, because I think it's mostly related to the PCIe 5 bus that they need that. Right. So, I don't have that. So I don't really notice it. But, and same thing with CPU technology. I'm not up on the latest usually until I'm ready to build. And I'm like, all right, what's the newest technology? What's this? What's that? And refresh myself, and there's no need for me to stay up because I'm not building high-end components for anybody else. I just build my own PCs, so I don't need to learn the technology until it's time. But I try to stay up at least on like the latest components, just not to the level of the buses and the power consumption and things like that. So we're going to be getting into needing a 2,000 watt power supply before long. You just watch the meter.
To come up with some other solution for power.
Dual shot and 850 watt power supplies. Shotgun them things.
Water power mine. I built a little dam.
Water cooled. So
turbines.
There you go. the cooling system in there runs a turbine to make its own power.
Runs a turbine.
So I'm pumping water cooling through my PC. It's also running a turbine, generating some additional energy. All right. This seems insane. And from what I've understood is basically since the 4090s and the 4080s cards come out, burnt connectors has been pretty prevalent. So somebody's got to do something. So hopefully they've learned over this year, and hopefully the splitting of the 12 pin plus 4 pin into 2 6-pin connectors to feed into that will help. We'll see, right? We'll see if that helps to lessen the heat on those connectors. So, you got anything else, Nick, you want to chat about? You need to go get the fire extinguisher before we end this episode?
No, not yet. It's not on fire yet.
All right.
Fingers crossed.
Well, let us know down in the comments. Have you experienced this? Did you have melted Molodexes on your power connectors? Did you have any of that stuff? What do you think about this? What do you think about us consuming 600 watts out of your power supply for a 4080 and 4090? I don't know very many people who have that high series card, but they're out there. Let us know if you got one. What do you think? Do you worry about that, or did you put in a different connector that feeds multiples into the one that you got, or running a single 12 pin into your 16 pin? What are you running? Let's know down in the comments. Then you've reached the end. If you're not subscribed, subscribe to our channel to help us out, and hit that bell to get notified every time we put out new videos. We hope you enjoyed this episode. We hope to catch you in the next one.